Hi, I'm Marcin Kuśmierczyk. Welcome to Eastern Insights. Why does Eastern Europe's perspective on global affairs matter? Because here, history and geopolitics collide in ways that shape our world. Yet these voices often go unheard. This podcast bridges this gap. Each episode translates in-depth analysis from my Polish YouTube channel, Polityka Zagraniczna, which means international politics. For the last few years, this platform has dissected foreign policy, security, and the forces shaping Eastern Europe. Using AI tools like 11 Labs, we adapt these nuanced insights into English, preserving their depth while making them accessible to all. Whether we're unpacking Russia's latest moves, EU debates, or security challenges in Central Europe, our mission is simple: to foster informed dialogue by sharing Eastern Europe's untold stories. If you're curious about the world beyond headlines, subscribe now. Join me as we decode the complexities of global affairs, one Eastern European insight at a time.
Hello and welcome back. Today we're talking about a potentially significant shift, a new beginning in the relationship between Poland and Germany. During a recent meeting with the new German Chancellor, Prime Minister Donald Tusk spoke quite eloquently about this. Now, considering the state of relations during the previous Chancellor Olaf Scholz's term, you might think improving things slightly wouldn't be too difficult. But in practice, it's often much easier for Poland and Germany to talk about controversial and problematic issues than it is to find common ground. So, are these words about a new opening really justified? Let's dig in. Okay, so the German Chancellor visited Poland on his very first day in office, right after talks with Emmanuel Macron in Paris. Interestingly, the start of Chancellor Friedrich Merz's term hasn't exactly filled everyone with optimism about the German government's efficiency. For the first time ever, they couldn't secure the necessary majority in the German parliament on the very first vote. What does that mean? Well, some members of the coalition government didn't vote as expected. We don't know exactly who, because it was a secret ballot, which just fuels speculation. Is it dissatisfaction among the SPD partners? Or is Merz dealing with a rebellion within his own ranks? Either way, neither option points to smooth sailing and harmonious cooperation within this new government. To even restart the parliamentary process and hold a second vote, they needed cooperation from the Left Party. The AfD, the largest opposition party, remains isolated, particularly after the German counterintelligence agency classified them as an extremist party. But the increasingly sharp struggle with the growing alternative right, not just in Germany but across Europe, is a whole separate topic for another time. Let's get back to the meeting between Merz and Tusk. It was a strange visit. Rhetorically, there were plenty of big words. Talk of the strategic importance of Polish-German relations, not just for Europe, but for the fate of the world. Talk of a new opening, and even joint leadership in Europe. However, at the same time, when they discussed specific issues during the press conference, you could see clear differences in the positions of Poland and Germany. Migration was right at the forefront. Poland criticized Germany's border controls and emphasized the value of the Schengen zone. Donald Tusk argued that the only logical way to protect against illegal migration is to strengthen the external borders of the European Union, not implement internal controls. The Polish Prime Minister pointed out that the entire burden of securing borders with Russia and Belarus falls on Poland. He stated, "We expect not just understanding from Germany, but full support." Tusk clearly referenced the Migration Pact, saying, "I can't imagine Poland becoming a victim of the European Union's actions in the matter of migration." He went on to say that Poland will not accept Germany sending migrants back to Poland. Merz, for his part, was largely on the defensive, emphasizing Germany's right to regulate access to its own territory. Okay, let's just pause and comment on something here. We're talking about Polish-German relations. We're talking about a time when Donald Tusk is the Prime Minister of the Polish government. And we're talking about this happening at the peak of election campaign emotions. I am absolutely aware that for a large part of Polish society, the Polish Prime Minister's firm stance towards Germany might seem unbelievable. And look, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. There have been comments in the German media suggesting this is all just political theater. that Tusk and Merz actually agree on migration. But for the sake of the campaign, Tusk has to appear very tough on Germany. These comments, of course, were quickly picked up by opponents of the current government in Poland. But the reality of this situation doesn't easily fit into one party's view or another on Polish foreign policy. So, while acknowledging these comments exist, let's also note that there were many more comments in the German press, among German commentators, expressing genuine surprise. They expected a difficult visit, but not so difficult that the Polish Prime Minister would so strongly criticize the German government's migration policy. And yes, I know that for a significant part of Polish society, there's a deeply held view that Tusk is a politician committed to Germany, and nothing will change that opinion. Again, everyone has the right to their own assessment. I'll share my overall assessment at the very end of this discussion. For now, I want to stick to what was actually said during that press conference. Short pause. Infrastructure also came up. There was talk of a high-speed rail line between Warsaw and Berlin. But honestly, issues like that are easy to mention at a press conference and then conveniently forget. I think something seemingly more long-term actually held greater significance: the expansion of NATO infrastructure. Allied pipelines that provide access to fuel during wartime still end in Germany. Extending this kind of infrastructure, actual decisions, not just declarations of friendship, that's the real test of how effective Polish policy is with the German side. Staying with military issues, Merz identified himself as skeptical about a broad European expansion of military investment, though he's open to discussion. And here, too, there was a clear difference between Poland and Germany. In Merz's view, the key aspect of European action must be harmonizing defense systems across the continent. This means buying more equipment from the same suppliers, presumably European, meaning German, suppliers. For Germany, this is a play for financial stimulus for their own industry. For Poland, the goal is to build its own defense capabilities as quickly as possible. Prime Minister Tusk stated that Poland is developing rapidly and won't ask anyone for money. He said our goal is to have the largest and strongest army in Europe. If European programs help us, we'll do it faster. But if not, we'll do it without them. In political matters, there was repeated emphasis on plans to revitalize the Weimar Triangle. That's the relationship between Poland, Germany, and France, and also the idea of inviting the United Kingdom to join this group. Donald Tusk said we'll be surprised by the pace of practical decisions regarding the defense industry. Notably, while there are plans for defense treaties with France and still with Great Britain, there was no mention of a similar treaty with Germany. Short pause. During the German Chancellor's visit, the topic of World War II and reparations was, of course, going to come up. Merz's position is a textbook example of German policy in this area, continued by successive governments. You can sum it up in 3 points. 1. Rhetorical chest-beating. Words about guilt and responsibility. 2. A clear statement that the issue of reparations is legally closed. And 3. Foggy, often contentless announcements, projects, or ideas for actions that in no way match the scale of German crimes. But it doesn't really matter because they usually just remain announcements anyway. This time, it's worth noting that the German Chancellor acknowledged the establishment of a temporary monument in Berlin. This stone commemorates millions of victims and a country razed to the ground. In response, Donald Tusk stated that the decisions on reparations were made during the communist era, and Poland had no influence on them. He said the Germans have never truly compensated for the crime committed, and Poland won't ask for it. Will the time come for real gratification? We'll see. The Polish Prime Minister ended his statement on that note. In this matter, absolutely no progress or change in positions should be expected. Of course, it will be interesting to see how the issue of the monument in Berlin and the Polish-German Center evolves, although it doesn't seem like it will be something that truly satisfies the Polish side. If we are to expect any changes in this matter, they will likely be changes for the worse. I know that sounds grim, but that's the reality, Because in Germany, the social and political pressure to move past the rhetoric of guilt, rhetoric based on guilt, is growing. Not to mention any actions that would truly compensate for this guilt. Now, let me offer a personal comment on Friedrich Merz's visit and his meeting with the Polish Prime Minister. This comment will make the most sense if you listen to it in its entirety, because a part of it taken out of context might sound different from its full meaning. But the most important aspect is this. In my opinion, it was a very important visit precisely because it didn't mean much. I know that sentence sounds contradictory, but let me explain. 10 years ago, if the German Chancellor came to Poland and showered Poland with such compliments, such words about strategic partnership, about leadership in Europe, that would have been enough to win over a significant part of Polish society and a significant part of the Polish political class, including the political group that is currently governing Poland. Today, it doesn't work. Today, those words don't really carry the same weight. We immediately think about what specific decisions will make us strategic partners of Germany. What concrete actions will lead to us jointly leading Europe? Today, simply complimenting Poland isn't effective. Once upon a time, the very need for recognition in the eyes of many Germans was so strong that a few nice words could buy over a significant portion of the Polish political class. Today, that just doesn't work. This meeting clearly shows the erosion of German influence in Poland. They are still very strong, and we should absolutely not underestimate them. But it's a different reality now. The influence on public opinion is also vastly different compared to the past. Of course, there are questions about credibility, and I'll get to that at the very end. Nevertheless, the Polish Prime Minister, standing right next to the German Chancellor, says things like, "We won't ask you for anything." He says, "We will build the strongest army in Europe with you or without you, with your help or without your help, with European programs or without them." He says this is a German duty. He clearly states what he disagrees with regarding German policy. He says Poland will sign treaties with France or Great Britain because these countries have the tools we need in the area of security. We have a completely different level of rhetorical relations today than in the past. Polish European policy today is not primarily based on relations with the Germans. I know how the governing coalition is sometimes portrayed, but that's not where the main focus is. Polish European policy is based primarily on the Nordic-Baltic axis. But when it comes to relationships with other European powers, it's more about France. Again, it's crucial not to trivialize Germany or its influence. Their influence on European institutions, their sheer scale, their economy, and the changes happening within Germany are all significant. But today, even the liberal camp in Poland, whose previous governments clearly built their European policy on relations with Germany, sees that there are other partners with whom this game can be played. And the change in government in Germany doesn't alter this, because it was already visible during Olaf Scholz's term. The first days of Friedrich Merz in the Chancellery suggest that the stability or efficiency of this coalition might not be very high. It could be quite fragile, and in a situation where the outcome of the political game in Europe is increasingly decided by the factor of security, countries that lack the necessary tools in this area lose importance. And that is the case with Germany right now. That's why the Germans are so eager to invest quickly in their defense industry. Yes, part of this is about their economy and stimulating further development. But it's also about defending Germany's political position across the continent. But today, relying primarily on Germany is a strategy from the past. Germans are an important element of this policy. Germany must always be an important element of any Polish government's European policy. It's unavoidable. But it is no longer the primary partner for the current Polish government. But here we come to the final problem, the ultimate challenge in this whole issue, the credibility of what the Polish Prime Minister is saying. Because tough rhetoric can sound great, but if it's not backed up by reality, it remains just tough rhetoric. And this is where the Polish Prime Minister faces a significant test of credibility. When he makes these kinds of statements against German migration policy, against taking migrants back from Germany to Poland, when he says we'll be surprised by the speed of practical decisions on the defense industry. These are all claims that can be verified and checked against reality very quickly. Donald Tusk is excellent at building an image during press conferences, if you'll excuse the colloquialism, of this decisive European manager who can convince everyone. But we saw how this rhetoric played out regarding the Migration Pact. The rhetoric was identical, very tough, and it ended in a classic Polish defeat at the EU level, where we lost both the vote in the European Parliament and the vote in the Council. Regarding programs for things like arms purchases, it will soon become clear who is really calling the shots. Are these programs genuinely aimed at rapidly building defense capabilities with wide access to funds for countries on the eastern flank of the European Union? Or are they primarily protectionist industrial programs for the Western arms industry? This is a real test of feasibility for the Polish Prime Minister. And if this very tough rhetoric isn't supported by tangible political results, it will look very bad for Donald Tusk. However, if he does succeed, if these European programs truly benefit Polish interests in the defense sector, if the Polish Prime Minister can significantly influence German immigration policy, if Germany doesn't send groups of migrants to Poland, then it must be acknowledged as a major success for him. There isn't much gray area here, not much middle ground where everything can just be glossed over at the next press conference. So, we need to watch the next few weeks and months closely. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll see you next time.